Welcome to A State of Mind, a podcast series all about motivating, inspiring, and educating you in the art of selling luxury real estate. The podcast is brought to you by the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing. I'm Tammy Sims, lead trainer for the Institute and a full-time real estate professional in St. Petersburg, Florida for more than 2 decades now. In this episode, we're going to talk about building a referral network outside of your local market. Today's podcast is brought to you in part by Real Marketing, the only marketing firm recommended exclusively by the Institute. Real Marketing utilizes over 30 years of expertise, and their products are built and customized for you to dominate any neighborhood anywhere. Go to realmarketingforyou.com. That's real marketing, the number 4, you.com. Also look for past A State of Mind episodes with CEO David Collins as our guest. I'm here again today with my co-host Jack Miller, a 25 plus year veteran luxury agent with Onward Real Estate in the greater Nashville, Tennessee market. Jack, it's great to see you.
Hi, Tammy. Good to see you as always.
And also today we have a special guest, my friend and fellow real estate professional, Ed Aiken with Compass Real Estate. Ed's career started in the home building arena in Dallas, Texas, and then took him into the real estate side of the industry. He holds 12 designations and certifications and has been active in leadership roles in several real estate associations, including in Dallas, Houston, at the state level with Texas Realtors, and also at the national level. But he found his passion in Playa del Carmen in 2007, and since then he's been helping clients purchase second homes in Mexico, Belize, Costa Rica, Panama, and Honduras, and probably more. Since our topic today is building a referral network outside of your local market, there isn't a better example than Ed's networking to build relationships with some of the very best developers in the world and other agents across the globe. So, Ed, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity for me to come share global real estate and global networking. Excited to share.
Hi, Ed. Good to meet you.
Good to meet you, Jack.
So I want to tell you, Ed, it's very interesting. When Tammy first brought this topic up and said, Jack, let's talk about building a referral network. I said, Tammy, I cringed a little bit because there's a lot of things I do really well. And I think this is the weak spot in my talent set. I said, I've done a terrific job of managing relationships and building relationships locally with all the brokers in our region here in the greater Nashville area. And I pride myself on that relationship or those relationships. I've done a great job generating referrals from our past clients and our sphere of influence, but I have not done a good job at building relationships outside my market. So I'm really curious to hear about some of the best practices and what you've done to develop those relationships.
I'd start off with saying, man, like you, I started off locally and really trying to I got into real estate really late in my life after building houses for 25 years. And I guess I was kind of doing real estate because I managed some sales teams. I sold my own houses from time to time. But I got in late and I realized that if I was going to be successful, I had to go get involved and meet people and raise my hand and ask questions. And for me, my real estate career, like Tammy said, started in Playa del Carmen. I came back to the States and got a license. And I wanted to share my pretty beaches and those opportunities because there was really nobody out there that I knew or came across that was selling, global real estate. So started off locally in Dallas, actually in Houston, really. I take that back. I was in Dallas for about 8 months. And then I had an opportunity to go down to South Padre Island and sell some beach properties there. And then I landed in Houston, which is where I really got involved with local real estate and CIPS which is Certified International Property Specialist. That's the background that I'm showing off today. It just got started there.
That's
And
interesting. I wasn't even familiar with that designation, so that shows you how far behind the curve I am.
and Ed, you did when you talk about raising your hand, you got involved in your local associations, right? And then got into leadership and really just took off with taking all the trainings that you could and attending all the things that you could, right?
Yes, I overcommitted, I tell people from time to time. And I guess my really first big opportunity was I had the opportunity to chair the global committee at the Houston Association of Realtors, which is the second largest association in the country at 49,000 members. And
Mm.
NAR awards global committees every year at the NAR conference. And, it starts at silver award, gold award, platinum award, and diamond award. And I often brag about this here in Texas. I feel like an Olympian because with multiple associations, I have won the silver, the gold, the platinum, and the diamond award, which is the highest award. And so, yeah,
Good job.
I got involved there at Houston. And it just really opened some doors, along with uh, a mentor telling me, go get your CIPS. And his name was Richard Miranda. And he was, I thought we were the only two CIPSs in the state of Texas. And I kidded him until the day he passed away. I said, you are the most famous CIPS in Texas. And I said, I'm number two. And he says, yes, I know. And with that being said, there's a lot of CIPSs in Texas, but we use that network to really, raise our hand and share and do business and really help others.
I think about all the other networks, right? When we talk about the associations and whatnot, our listeners who have tuned in repeatedly know that I often talk about working with my mom. And I remember my mother dragging me to the state association conferences, and she served as a district leader for the Residential Real Estate Council. It was called CRS at that point, and that's the CRS designation. But I
Wow.
realized that I just gave a referral. I have an active outbound referral right now to someone who I met more than 2 decades ago in that state leadership capacity. And so this realtor is probably 2 hours from me, right? So it's further than I want to service, but I pulled into those networks. And so that makes me want to really talk about the power of referrals. And I know Ed, you and I have exchanged some prospective referrals in the past. And so I'm curious how much of your business comes from referrals versus direct clients that are people finding you directly.
I'm going to say 60 to 70%.
Wow.
Here locally for stuff, we get a lot of referrals coming into Texas. And then, outside the US, man, it's 80% because people say somebody will go on social media and say, hey, I need some help in Mexico. And man, 10 people will say, hey, call Ed. He's, who you want. And that's the same for Costa Rica. That's the same for what I want to say, Honduras, Belize, Barbados. My name gets mentioned often because of designations, because man, that's just the best way to network is to get, they're like families, and I call them familias. And so
Mm.
the CIPS familia, man, I get referrals all year long. And I got my CIPS to go sell pretty beaches around the world. What I didn't realize as I was getting my CIPS was the world is moving to Texas. So you're getting referrals through this CIPS network. It's just really incredible. And it's just not one. You can't, count on just one designation. And as I coach my agents and I do a lot of teaching now, I tell everybody, man, these designations, it opens up doors and designations earn you money. And NAR keeps track of that. They say having your ABR designation. Most realtors that have that are about $100,000 in commission compared to the average realtor around the country makes $40,000. And if you listen to NAR, 74% of realtors in the United States last year sold zero real estate properties. Zero.
That's
I don't know how
that.
it happens, but and I have to raise my hand. I had one or two of those, unfortunately, on my real estate team, last year. But they had full-time jobs and real estate's their second deal. So designations, CIPS, they say is about 185,000. And I've always heard having our beautiful CLHMS is over 250,000 on average for our members here at the Institute. So I'm a big believer in designations and how if you use those, you can network around the world.
That's wonderful, Ed. I want to ask you too. So clearly, designations makes a big impact on your business internationally. What else do you do to stay top of mind when you're talking with agents in other markets? How do you push your name to the front of the pack?
Um, first of all, it's consistency, reaching out, continue to reach out. A lot of us meet a realtor in a different area of the country or the world, and then we don't do anything with it. And I have some coaches that I've used for quite some time, and they've developed a series of emails. Okay, so over the years, I put realtors into my little series of emails, and every now and then, once a quarter, they get a little email saying, "Hey, this is Ed in Texas. We love referrals." And I ask them, "What's your perfect referral client look like?" So, I'm trying to get to know them. Um, I remember going to conferences around the country and not knowing anybody, but now everywhere I go, because I've built a consistent, pipeline of referrals. I mean, people come up to me from everywhere and say, "Hey, I've seen you on social media. I get your emails, they're fun, and, always getting asked questions about it." So, man, it's consistency, going to these conferences. And when I say going to conferences, it starts at your state level here at Texas Realtors. I tell my agents, I said, you got to go to the Texas Realtor Conference because you go raise your hand and say, "Hey, I'm in Dallas, Texas, and I speak Spanish. If you have any referrals, this is why you should send them to me." And then, from there, you go to your NAR conferences, the one in May, the one in November. I tell my agents and all my realtor friends, you go there, raise your hand. I'm in Texas. I can help you in Texas. And, we like to brag that everybody's moving to Texas. So, that's a good opportunity. And then, the conferences that we have, within the Institute of Luxury Home Marketing, man, I've been to one of those, and I'll tell you, man, what an incredible, fun time that was. I have some great memories. I need to go back, fit it into my schedule, but at the same time, going to that conference led me into something else. Some
Ed,
very
I,
active members.
I
Yeah.
want to circle back on two things that you said in that last piece. Number one is the importance of staying in touch with people. You
Hmm.
can meet people at a conference, right? But if you don't stay in touch with them, then that's just a one-off
It's a lost
passing.
opportunity. Yeah, sure.
Exactly, exactly. And so I get your emails, Ed, and also there are a tremendous number of real estate professionals that farm me, if you will. And I know off the top of my head where to send referrals in those arenas. But also the other thing is that your involvement can then lead to other connections and other opportunities. So I love those. Now,
It was the owner of Realm that was at the Institute, Julie Foppel. She was there.
that's
And
right.
man, I met her. And, one thing led to another. So,
That's right. And so I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about identifying your feeder markets, right? Jack, you and I have talked about this in past episodes and anecdotally from experience. But I want to know, Ed, you're kind of in a unique situation in that, particularly for your beach properties, your feeder markets are everywhere, right? It's not like Jack, you in Nashville think about, keeping an eye on where your feeder markets are as places to focus on,
Yeah,
right?
for us, yeah, it's on one hand. I mean, for us, it's the West Coast. And by the way, Ed, you're our country cousins because everybody who is looking at moving to Tennessee is typically also looking at Texas as an option and vice versa. So we have a lot of folks in common in that regard. But for us, it's very specific. It's the West Coast, the major markets across the West Coast, and Chicago and New York. Those are our major feeder markets. And that's pretty much, and then after that, it's kind of all over the place, but those are where we focus our energy. But for Ed, I mean, yeah, you're right, Tammy. It doesn't, this seems like it'd be a very dispersed group that you're trying to get your name out to.
Yeah. And for most of our listeners, um, you're going to be looking to identify your specific feeder markets, right? To put the most effort into building relationships with real estate professionals that are most likely to send business to you. So there's Realtor.com has a cross-market report tool where you can identify the IP addresses of the computers that are searching for real estate listings on Realtor.com in your area. And there's lots of different ways we talk about in the training that you can identify feeder markets and really target those places that are most likely to send you business. Ed, knowing that yours is across the board, are there any specific markets that you've identified, and how have you determined where the most concentrated referrals are coming from?
Yeah, I'm in a lot of conversations about referrals, and like you said, the realtor.com is one way to check. I often hear people going to the U-Haul report, showing where all the U-Hauls are going. You
Oh my
know,
goodness, that's brilliant. The U-Haul report. Now, that would probably likely be in not necessarily in the luxury arena, but that's really brilliant. So I wanted
You're
to call
right,
that
but
out.
if the people using U-Hauls are going, so are everybody else, that are using movers. But the U-Haul report puts out a thing, and it shows like a ton of U-Hauls coming from California to Texas. So I tell you what, a lot of my friends do is within their networking groups, they find, where are their feeder markets, and then they go to try to connect within the Institute of Luxury Home Market. Okay, who's from California? I need to kind of reach out and just raise my hand and say hello, and all the other, different networking groups. And at the conferences, when I go to a realtor conference, man, I'm trying to get around people from California and saying, hey, I'm here and in Texas, if you got anybody, and vice versa. I need, contacts there. Now for international, it's a little bit different. So, I go, because I play hard in Mexico the most. I'm super involved with that association. It's called AMPI, which is the NAR of Mexico. We have 20 AMPI executives coming to Houston next week for my birthday. And they're not coming for my birthday, they're coming for the Houston Livestock Rodeo. We always take them there, and we do a couple days of cross, education with HAR and AMPI, but we got them coming. And so I'm asking them, where are people coming from? You know, um, and what I found, like the Riviera Maya, which is Cancun, Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Mahua, that part of Mexico, the number one buyer is Texans. Well, guess what? I'm in Texas. So, man, my sphere, and I tell all the realtors in Texas, your sphere is buying second homes in the Riviera Maya. And 7 out of 10 people would love to have a beach house, on the Caribbean. So, and at the same time, I'm asking Ampi, okay, well, after Texas, who's coming? Well, they say Canada. Well, guess what? I know that the president of the Canadian Association of Realtors, okay, Korea. I had a lot of conversations. Hey, if any of your members need help in connecting their clients going to Mexico, I'm your person. And we get opportunities there. So it's important to find where people are coming from. You go over to Cabo and up the Baja Peninsula, which is where I'll be in a couple of weeks. Number one buyer is California. So what do? I do? I reach out to a lot of my California friends and say, hey, I got this unbelievable opportunity in Cabo or La Paz or wherever. And they're like, wow, people are always asking us about Baja, Mexico. Well, let's start, doing some co-marketing, and let's, have some fun. So
Ed, I think I was just thinking if you are going to one of these conferences, we need to wear cowboy hats so they'll quickly identify us
yeah.
and see where we're from. So I do have a question though. When you're talking about somebody from Canada, for example, or California, wherever, and building that referral network, you're talking about these different beach communities, in Baja California or the Caribbean or wherever. Uh, are you working as a buyer broker in those markets? Are they referring them? Are these folks referring their clients to you, and you're the buyer broker working those beach communities?
It's different, and it's different depending on if I'm in Mexico. Really, throughout Mexico or Belize or whatever. My thing, personally, my niche is really working with developers directly. Okay.
Hmm.
That's my that's what anybody can do. You can go
Hmm.
develop, or create relationships with developers where you send clients to developers and developers are going to send you a referral fee.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That makes sense. Great.
A lot of people that I come across or contact me, they don't have time to go do that. They don't want to do that. They just want to pass it along to me and they
Sure.
want me to pay them some type of referral fee. And we love paying referral fees. I'll do them every hour on the hour. Okay. Um, in Mexico, I actually have a business partner slash brokerage in Mexico, that I can actually go do individual stuff, in Mexico. I don't do a ton of it, but occasionally I'm helping a buyer go buy an individual property outside a developer. But 90% of my stuff, I'm taking people to my favorite developers, which might be the St. Regis brand, might be the Four Seasons brand, maybe a small boutique broker. But my biggest client in the Riviera Maya is the largest developer in the Riviera Maya for the last 20 years. We have
Okay.
15 projects at all times, and they love paying referrals to agents around the world.
Are
So
these typically condos or single family homes?
this particular developer, for the most part, or 80% of their stuff is condos,
Hmm.
vertical stuff in Playa del Carmen or in Tulum or in Cancun. But in Merida, they have some opportunities to buy lots and some single family residences. And prices start as low as 160,000. And right now, they're really high as $1 million. That's about to change. They got a new project that they're about to announce with.
And look at that. Ed is working that referral right now, right? Jack, you are thinking in your mind, which of my
Port
clients do I think
Vallarta.
we're going to go there, right?
Ooh.
Maybe even you. Ed, something else that you said, I want to go back to this the conference idea. So many of our institute members utilize conferences, especially those that are focused on luxury, if that's what they're looking to do, to build those relationships. But you made the point that when you're attending a conference, you seek out those folks that you know are likely to be the best, most likely referrals. And it makes me think about, I want to share one of the best examples that I have seen of really targeting that focus. And that is at one of our Leaders in Luxury conferences that the Institute puts on. I remember Jim Wahlberg from the San Francisco Bay Area in
Great
California
friend.
and Patrick Ryan from Chicago. So the two of them have gotten to know each other, and they actually share some feeder markets, right? That San Francisco, Chicago area. And one year they got together ahead of time and they looked at the list of attendees who were registered to come. And they identified a dozen or so individuals that they'd never met before, right? So first time attendees
Mhm.
and those that were in markets that were likely feeders. And they reached out to those dozen or so individuals and they invited them in two groups to treat them for dinner, right? Offsite after the activities, right? These are people that have never met. And so they just invited them, right? Talk about raising your hand. And they had a wonderful time, small enough groups to really get to know one another. And they absolutely cemented relationships with those folks, which of course they followed up with. But I thought that was really, really important because you can go to a convention or a conference and you can just fill your bag with all the swag, right? And go to the classes and all of that. But being intentional about it is really something that is important. And I know, Ed, you have done a number of very intentional events and things like that. You talked about it, bringing folks in for the livestock and that sort of thing. But you had one in particular that was about the Super Bowl, and I want you to share that story, if you will.
No, absolutely. First of all, I want to make sure that I mention that, man, I'm one of the biggest fans of Jim Wahlberg. What an incredible individual. And talking about building a network, oh my God. I've only really got to know him over the past 3 years. And man, I've learned so much from him. And he's all about doing intentional meetings, and he travels a ton, and man, he looks to see who he needs to be meeting, as he travels. He was here in Dallas last year for I think it's called the 1,000 megawatt something something. And he reached out to me and said, man, let's sit down and let's have a conversation, and man, we went through a lot of stuff such as networking and how we build our business. We share a common thing. We both have an earring in our left ear, and we had different stories. I asked him about his story, and he said, "Well, I crossed over the equator on a sailboat, and if you do that, you're a pirate, and you get one." And I said, "Well, I had a Harley Davidson, and I said when I had my Harley, I bought an earring,
That's right.
and
Two very different stories, but
two very different
something to
stories."
connect about.
And so yeah, it's kind of a funny story, but huge fan of that guy. And man, he's all about networking and doing homework to figure out,
That's
who.
right.
And going back to conferences, man, I really work hard to who do I meet. And at the same time, while I'm trying to do that, one thing I didn't mention is currently I am serving my third year as an NAR Global Ambassador. And there's 25 of us at NAR. My particular countries are Barbados, Belize, Trinidad, and Tobago. So at conferences, I'm working with the associations in these various countries, um, and trying to get them to our conference. And then, okay, who do you want to meet? Who are your freedom artists? Let's get you connected. What do you want to learn? Got a particular thing you want to learn? Because NAR probably has a class on that. I can introduce you probably to the instructor because I probably know the instructor. So yes, go to these things with intentions. Now to my Super Bowl party. I've actually done it twice. Um, and unfortunately, my partner in crime, he passed away. He's the one that taught me how to do it. And he was all about luxury. And he was a luxury brand ambassador for Bombardier jets, for Cartier jewelry, for Bentley, Rolls-Royce. I mean, that was his passion, and he did a lot of branding for them. And so he came to me when I was in Playa de Carmen. I was working on a development, running a sales team. And he says, I got this idea about doing a Super Bowl party. And I said, why do you want us involved? He said, well, I'm going to introduce you to 250 jet owners in 3 days. And I said, wow, that might be a client for who's buying our property in Mexico. And
Absolutely.
how and where can anybody meet 300 or 250 jet owners in 3 days? And he says, we're going to bring a car dealership. We're going to bring Bombardier jets. They're going to have their brand new jet parked in the parking lot because they too want to meet 250 jet owners to show their beautiful brand new Bombardier jet. Global 5000 at the time, I believe, was the jet. And he said, we're going to bring along Bentley, to our party. One year was Rolls Royce, but the second year was Bentley. And he said, where can Bentley meet 250 jet owners in 3 days? They don't get 250 jet owners at any Bentley dealership in a year. And
Right. Yeah.
then when you think about that and put it to the real estate side of things, my last Super Bowl party, we were representing, or our real estate group was a Bears at Chileno Bay in Cabo. Well, guess what? Chileno Bay and Cabo, it take them 5 years to see 250 jet owners and shake their hand, get their information, get their phone number. And we had some things that we did to get all those contact information. Bentley was getting their information, Bombardier Jets was getting their information. We were getting their information, and we put a list together. And I still have that mailing list. I still send stuff out, and occasionally I'll get something, about it, or, off of it. But yeah, meeting 250 jet owners, often thought about doing this same event, and I say we actually did a similar deal with what I want to say, Formula One in Austin one year. We did the same thing because the Super Bowl gets 100,000 people coming in, flying in. Um,
And I want to circle back because some of our listeners are probably going, now how, right? Like how did
Yeah,
they
how
get
did I
that
do it?
audience? And if I recall correctly, it's because you were soliciting and using the place where all of those private jet owners were parking their planes because they flew in for the Super Bowl, right?
Exactly. You can go on Google and Google Aiken Group Super Bowl party and see our really bad video. It's been a while, and video was not big at the time, and I didn't take advantage of it like I should have. But we will circle back and do a Super Bowl soon. But if you look at our video, and I'll tell you who was there. We had the Fox News team there, the CNN News team there. We had the governor of Texas there. We had both NFL foot or teams that were playing in the Super Bowl there. We also had Robert Irsay of the Colts. He was there. His team wasn't in the Super Bowl, but he flew in. And if you watch the video, you will see Air Force Two fly into our party, bringing Vice President Pence to our party. Okay. How did I get this opportunity? What I did is we went to an FBO, which is a fancy gas station for private jets. So we leased out the fanciest gas station to the Super Bowl. It was a FBO called Millionaire. For those that fly on private jets, you probably stopped in a Millionaire FBO somewhere around the world. So we knew all these jets were flying in for the Super Bowl, just like we did a thing in Austin for Formula One. We knew they were coming. And as they were landing in our parking lot, Bentley was there picking them up, driving them to the front door, which was all of about 100 yards, maybe sometimes closer than that. But I mean, it was action packed, 250 jets. And, as they walk in the doors of our party, I got a Bears there. I got 5 Bentleys sitting inside there. I got a jet company. We had an NFL clothing company there. We had Casa Amigas Tequila there with George Clooney. He owned it at the time. We had Tito's Vodka there. All these
So
people wanted to
Ed,
meet.
I'm going to stop you there because we can go on and on. But I think that the takeaway from this is look for opportunities, right? Jack, I'll bet that you're thinking in your mind, what are the things that are bringing lots of wealthy individuals? Maybe it's the Country Music Awards, something like that, and capitalize on the vendors that also want to build relationships with them. But if you're interested, watch Ed's video because it was a great thing. But as we wrap up our time together, Jack, any last thoughts or comments that you have on the building your referral network topic?
No, I've just found this fascinating. Listen, it's interesting because Ed, the things you're describing, it's I've said this so many times to agents through the years. There are so many different ways to be successful in this business, and you don't have to assume that the way one person does it is the way you need to do it. I think all of us, and in this case, all of us within this luxury network, need to find our niche. And Tammy and I talk about that a lot. Is like, where can we find our place, and how do we get there? And the way that I've gotten there and the way Tammy's gotten there is very different from the way that you've gotten there. And this has been absolutely fascinating to hear you talk about it.
Yep. I tell people that we all network in different places, whether
Hmm.
it's your church, whether it's your kids' soccer games, and or for me, I'm a member of a country club, so my clients often come from the country club. We all network in different places.
That's
And
right.
and you can't fish in just one hole. You move around and you go
That's
That's
right.
right. That's
hard.
right. And so it's a nice combination. I think all of us in the industry are focused on networking through those avenues that you're saying for prospective clients. But what I'd like our audience to have as the takeaway here is that your relationships with other real estate professionals outside of your market is also a fantastic source of business for you to improve your success, but also for you to take advantage of in an outbound scenario, right? When things get a little slow, look for opportunity in other markets for your clients who may want second home properties. Or if there's a trend of relocation for specific industries, look for that and make yourself available to your sphere of influence as a referral connector in other markets, right? So it's a whole nother piece of our pipeline and what we do professionally. And provides a better level of service to our clients, which is an underlying theme, right, Jack, that you and I talk about quite often.
Absolutely.
Well, our time for today is up, but I want to thank you, Ed, so much for joining us. Jack, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. And for all of you watching and listening, I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of A State of Mind, the Art of Selling Luxury Real Estate. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing, you can find more at www.luxuryhomemarketing.com. If you like what you just heard, please share it with a friend and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you've got a hot topic that you'd like us to discuss in a future podcast, feel free to let us know. Send an email to info@luxuryhomemarketing.com. Thanks so much for listening.